Divine Connection Marketing is a 500 Fortune company that always connects you to the right connection. Check them out.
Welcome to Devon Dragon Radio. I'm your host, M.L.Ruscsak. I'm here with special guest, Scott Williams. Welcome.
Hi, Emil. How are you?
Good. And yourself?
I'm fantastic, thanks. Bit wet. It's quite rainy down here, but anyway.
I was just going to ask how Australia is.
Yeah, there's been some flooding where I am. I'm quite safe, but my daughter had to be evacuated due to flood. So, yeah, it's quite wet.
Well, I wish her all the best.
Thank you.
But you are the author of Lightbulb Moments. So, okay, what prompted you to write the book, and what is the book about?
Okay, well, it's got an interesting genesis in that I was actually at the pub with a friend, and we were having a spirited discussion about whether the world was going to hell in a handbasket. He was very much of the opinion that everything was going to hell and we were all doomed.
Okay.
And I was telling him, well, actually, things are far better than they've ever been in many aspects, but I didn't have the data at my fingertips, and I'm not very good at arguing in the moment. So he ended up just saying, I don't know what you're talking about. And we carried on, had a pleasant evening. But I went home, and that evening or that night, all the arguments came into my head. You know, when you remember those things afterwards, you think, I should have said this, I should have said that. And that was the beginning of the book, in that I started thinking about all those things. And even though you can never go back the day after and say, hey, by the way, that argument that I lost last night, in fact, here are all the amazing arguments I have to refute that.
Right. We call that petty, so we can't do that. But we can write a book about it.
We can, and that's the ultimate petty, I suppose. My 65,000 word response to that argument.
But that's always the fun part, though. You can go back through history and find out why the world is actually in a great place. Yeah,
I mean, obviously right now, a lot of people would think that's in a terrible place, and it is. Mm-hmm. I'm not trying to tell you that it's not, a very difficult place to be in at the moment. But my argument is that basically things have always been getting incrementally better, but it's a bit like the stock market. It's going up and then there'll be a crash. We're in a bit of a crash right now, but it will eventually keep ticking up, and things will continue to improve. Like you can see over history, like obviously we're not hunting mammoths anymore, we're doing other things. And there will be some people who would argue that we're on the wrong track, but I think in the big scheme of things, we're doing okay.
Exactly. It's okay. We're in a valley. We call it pits and valleys, or hills and whatever, but we're in a pit right now. Yeah, it sucks, but it's going to get better when we change a few things about society.
Yeah. Now, I'm not telling you that everything is going to get better and that everything's going to stay the same. In fact, nothing stays the same.
No.
And there will be some things that we take as normal now that will no longer exist. And but other things will take their place, and those things will inevitably end up being better.
Exactly. Look at the rotary phone from the 1980s to our cell phones that we have today. Things get better and we forget things.
It's funny. I was talking to my daughter last night. She's 16, and she was wanting to go back. I think she's been watching a lot of Stranger Things and wants to go back to a simpler age. Even, maybe not the horror, but the sort of rotary phones and all that kind of stuff. And she was bemoaning the fact that she has her cell phone and is on TikTok and can get text messages any time of day or night. And I said, well, to be honest, if my friends and I, in the sort of 70s, when I was her age, had the option of having mobile phones, we would have said, yeah, bring it on. We love it. Well, I would have loved the idea. I think you can't, once the genie's out of the bottle, you can't put it back in again.
No, you can't.
So, no.
I mean, I can remember being a kid, and if I wanted privacy on the phone, I had to take the phone in the cord into a closet to get privacy.
Yes.
Now, if I want privacy, I just move myself from wherever I'm at because I have the phone right there.
Yep, exactly. And there are any number of things that are like that. And like there are definitely, it's obviously arguments that we have lost some privacy due to, obviously the data that's being collected on us. Probably we're having data collected on us right now by YouTube or somebody. But anyway, but so there is a loss of privacy as well, even though you can have that in the moment privacy of being able to take your phone anywhere. But I don't know. A lot of people would disagree with me. I'm very passionate about this idea that we need to be a bit more optimistic, because without optimism, where are we going?
Exactly. And at the same time, you have to think of it like this. When we're in a pit, we start inventing things to get ourselves out as a society. This is the age of inventions right now, if you think about it.
Yeah, totally agree. And you can see that in the book, that it's at those moments of distress where we come up with massive responses to things, like obviously World War II, horrible thing, but it led to a lot of advances that, things like penicillin and a lot of things that we, take for granted today, but in fact, probably we wouldn't be as advanced if it hadn't happened.
Exactly. You can take any major critical event that was disastrous in that moment, and then look 10 years later at the growth that we had because of the inventions.
Yeah, I think even now with all of the fuel crisis and everything, I think that's going to drive green energy. It's going to drive a lot of innovation that probably wouldn't happen so fast. People have been, obviously we've seen people dragging their heels on that kind of thing because there are vested interests in the oil industry. And I think now that we are suffering as a result of what's going on, we're looking for ways to fix that, and we'll find them. The things are already there, but they will get better, they will get more efficient. And it's unfortunate because, some of the people who are very down on the way things are changing are people who are losing their jobs because of these innovations. And it's cold comfort to them to say, well, your mining jobs are going, but it's okay. You'll get a new job in sort of solar energy or something, because those jobs don't necessarily go to those people. But unfortunately, that's what happens. The Industrial Revolution that happened, there were people who, had cottage industries at home, then had to, they lost their jobs and had to go and work in factories, and it wasn't pleasant for a while. They're at moments of change, and we're going through a moment of change right now. It's uncomfortable, and things aren't always as as smooth as you'd like them to be.
Exactly. It's when you're living in your comfort zone, you're comfortable, everything's peachy, everything's the way you want it. When you start living out of your comfort zone, now you have to grow to new comfort.
Yes, for sure. And what I can't say to anybody is that it's going to be better for everybody all at once. I think the human race as a whole will improve, but the lot of individuals, that doesn't always get better.
No,
and we can't promise that.
No, it's going to be a lot of people hurting for a while because they are lost. They don't know how to grow.
Yes. And people fear change. A lot of people are very fearful of change. My sister my eldest sister, is very, I won't say fearful, but she's very dismissive of things and wants things to go back to the way they used to be. And that's a recipe for feeling sad a lot of the time, because things won't ever go back to the way they were. And you have to be able to move on and accept things as they are and make the best of those things, and they may not be exactly as you want them.
Exactly. It's not just, how do I say this? people didn't want change. They didn't want the light bulb when it was invented. They didn't want electricity when it was invented. They didn't
It was
want
dangerous.
Yeah. They didn't want the first automobile back in when Henry Ford brought it out with the Model T. Everything that we have today that we think of as a luxury, what did the entrepreneurs and business owners and inventors have to go through to make that change? Well, we're seeing it
just
right now.
You finish. Yeah. And those things disrupt the things the way the status quo. So when the automobile came in, if you were someone who was had made buggies, you would have been very upset about that. And if you couldn't adapt to service that new industry, then you would have lost your job or lost your business. In fact, I currently I'm a elementary school teacher, but the first 23 years of my career, I was in the family printing business. And one reason I'm not a printer anymore is because of technology changing. I lost my job because of technological change. Yeah, there are still printers, but not the way they used to be, and not anywhere near as many are required as they used to be. So it was a small business, had only employed about 10 people. There was no place for it anymore. And that's just the way the world is. You have to accept those things sometimes. I didn't like it. It was painful. I had to retrain at 37. I started doing a teaching degree. But it's been overall a big positive. I actually enjoy teaching far more than I ever enjoyed being in business.
Yeah, it's even, I'm in printing. I'm a publisher. So my factory, I have 4 people.
Businesses all across the planet are looking to make connections with people. Well, guess what? Divine Connection magazine is helping businesses not only walk in their purpose and passion, but to get connected to their potential. That's right. It's got to connect to your potential, and you can make it happen now because it is time to know your worth. As you get connected to people all across the planet, Divine Connections magazine will make it happen. And get featured in the magazine today and get your copy now, because there's no other time than a divine time to get connected to Divine Connections magazine.
That does books. Now, if you would have went back 30, 40 years ago, having 4 people would have been too much stress for 4 people to handle.
Yeah, for sure.
You would need 10 to 20 people for those same jobs.
Absolutely.
And that's technological advances.
Yeah, and you have to be able to adapt to those things to survive. And I think that's coming back to the book. I mean, this book is, you can see it up here. I can't point. I'll probably point in the wrong direction. Up here, Cave to Colosseum. The very first book only goes from, it's like basically the dawn of humanity up to the end of the Roman Empire. And I'm working on the follow-up now, which will take us up to the end of the Enlightenment. And there's probably going to end up being 4 books. It was originally one big book, and it was never going to get published like that. It would have been about a 250,000 word book.
Yeah, that's just too much to read at one time. So yeah, it's good to break it down, but at the same time, each volume you can see the growth that we've seen as humanity. Yes,
exactly. And I think even in the cave to Colosseum part of it, there isn't as much growth as as we might. We're used to seeing exponential growth now. Mm-hmm. Like in my grandmother's lifetime, she grew up with, like, she was born in 1895. She grew up with horses and carriages. There was no phone, not much electricity, and she lived to see people on the moon. In that very short, like, it was what, 65 years or so, no, 75 years that happened. Mm-hmm. But in 75 years back in the Roman times, very little would have happened. Very little technological change, very little change to people's lifestyles. It was very slow because particularly back in like with cavemen, they were learning how to do like just to have language. They were learning how to do a lot of the things we take for granted. So it was very slow because they were inventing all these basic things like how to have a tool. What is a tool? Do you use a tool? So it took them millennia just to get the things that we take for granted. And I think sometimes we look back at cavemen and go, well, you know, they were primitive and they were all these things, which they were, but they were also very inventive. And they also had to do the heavy lifting that we just take for granted, language and inventiveness, that kind of thing.
Where would we be if we didn't learn a language? Where would we be if we didn't learn how to make a hammer or knife or something to kill our food, you know, back?
Yeah. Well, we'd be nowhere.
Yeah.
Absolutely nowhere. Sorry, just it's morning here. I'm having my morning coffee.
Oh, you're good, because I have a lot of international shows, so we're good. But at the same time, those were the ones that were the inventors and the ones that got us to the Colosseum.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I mean, the Colosseum is made of concrete, which I didn't realize. A lot of concrete. It's not all stone, which I assumed it was. So the Romans invented concrete, things that we use all today. I mean, so we were slowly building on everything. Like we'd make a discovery and then it would lead to another one. And it happened slowly. Like I said, it was incremental. But as time goes by, it gets faster and faster. Like, for instance, this first book covers probably 100 million years of history, because it goes from the earliest sort of hominids up to the end of the Roman Empire. The second book is about 1,000 years, but covers as much development. The third book will probably be 200 years, and the fourth book will probably be 100 years because of the exponential growth of knowledge.
Exactly. And right there, the way you have this structured, you see the slow growth to almost the daily growth.
Yeah. Well, actually, got to give them a little bit of paper here because there's something I was looking at. In fact, it's about, my book's about collective learning. So it's how humanity gathers up the learning and distributes it and then grow and then adds to it. So, and then the whole body of knowledge grows. And Buckminster Fuller in 1982 estimated that up to 1900, knowledge doubled approximately every century. He said by 1945 it was doubling every 25 years. By 82, it was doubling every 12 to 13 months. And now it's thought that the whole body of human knowledge doubles every 12 hours.
That is a lot of knowledge in 12 hours.
It's a lot of knowledge in 12 hours. And that's why we can't have polymaths and geniuses like in the same way that we had Leonardo da Vinci and those people who knew they were doing science, they were doing art, they were doing physiology, all sorts of things, because there was the body of knowledge wasn't as big. You couldn't have one person across all those things now because there's too much knowledge. Just no one person couldn't possibly do it, which is why we're so specialized. Exactly.
Now you can find just about anything you want on the internet.
Yes, absolutely.
I'm learning SEC stocks and securities. I don't know if Australia has a stock exchange there. I assume they do, but I'm learning the US version of that for my company. Now, 10 years ago, me learning the same information would have been, oh, you need a lawyer, you need a CPA, and you need a degree.
Absolutely. And now those things are at our fingertips. And that's amazing. It's also slightly dangerous. I mean, when you're talking about corporate law, there are reasons there are corporate lawyers.
Yes, there is.
Nevertheless, I mean, it does give you the basis to be able to start talking about that, because and go into a meeting and know what you're talking about.
Exactly. Which is why I'm also going to school to learn what I'm reading. But yes, that's the same thing. I can learn from any college that I want from my computer. I no longer have to go 50,000 miles away to a university someplace in the middle of nowhere to learn something when I can take their classes right here from my desk?
Well, I've done 2 degrees and a couple of graduate certificates online.
Mhm.
So with minimal on-campus stuff. So yeah, and that was nearly 20 years ago that was happening. So now I haven't done the university stuff for a while, but I imagine that must have grown too.
I mean, everything
Particularly
that,
after COVID.
yeah, everything that we have now is because something prompted the need for the growth in this sector.
Yeah, for sure. Like obviously, as we just said, like obviously there was already infrastructure there to have online learning,
Mhm.
and then COVID hit. Now, as an elementary school teacher, like I was teaching from home for the best part of, well, over 2 years. I would have done a year's teaching from home nearly. We didn't have it quite so tough here as I think you guys had it, but we were locked down for probably about, I don't know, 3 months in 2020 and another 4 or 5 months in 2012. And because of technology, I was able to continue. I was able to get paid. I was able to teach my kids. I was able to do my job, all from the desk I'm sitting at now. So, and all those things were in place because of, I guess, some of the early forays into online learning that I was doing 20 years ago.
Right. I mean, okay. My cousin started online school back when he was in the 7th, 8th grade. This is 20 some years ago, over 20 years ago. That program has evolved to the national scale. And now we use that technology that anyone around the world can use to teach their kids.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And like you say, it's these kind of tough times that drive innovation and growth. It's just painful.
It is. And then you have the ones that don't want the growth. You have the teachers, oh, you can't get an education online. You have to come to a traditional school. This is 20 years ago. Why? Because they were afraid it would replace teachers today.
Yeah. Well, one thing we noticed, and my teacher colleagues and I, was that even though we were delivering stuff online, a lot of things didn't happen unless there was a teacher that's supervising and teaching. I mean, just providing stuff for kids. I mean, when you're an adult, it's different. I mean, I did a lot of online learning. It was self-directed, and I didn't have to have somebody over my shoulder. But when you're 11 and 12 and you really want to be playing Minecraft, and but people want you to do your homework, and mum and dad are in the corner trying to do their job as well because they're locked down and trying to do work from home. There's minimal supervision, and a lot of things just didn't get done. And we were basically told that it was all about, by our superiors, that it was all about the kids' mental health, and we weren't allowed to push them too much because it was could be detrimental to their well-being. So,
oh yes, I don't know about that. My daughter her last 2 years of high school were basically online learning.
Yeah.
She can't tell me anything she learned in those 2 years other than what she did in Minecraft.
Yeah. So I think, yeah, there's a lot of, even though it's amazing what was possible, I think that we can't discount the fact that face-to-face learning is great, is better in many respects. Although, like I said, nothing would have happened if we'd been locked down without online learning. Then there would have been no learning at all, and they wouldn't have been able to interact with their classmates or other people. So, small mercies.
It is. There's going to be more hurting and more technology coming out in the next couple years. But right now, like I said, we're in a growth stage. We don't see it because everyone's still inventing, and whatever they're inventing, we don't have access to yet, but it's coming.
Yeah, for sure. So that's kind of what I'm at, I suppose, is to point that out to people, because I was saying recently to somebody that like had COVID happened 30 or 40 years ago, then it would have been infinitely worse. Imagine people locked down at home and all they've got is their limited supply of VHS movies to watch, or just free-to-air television. They couldn't have worked from home. They'd have, they could have read books, but it depends how many books they had to read. Life would have been infinitely more difficult. So what development has given us in this regard is a way of doing the things we need to do remotely. So no one's saying that a replacement for being face to face with people, but we had to do what we had to do.
Exactly. And everything's coming. COVID was horrible, but it could have been a lot worse if it would have happened before 2000 hit, or even back in the 90s. It would have been horrible then. But at the same time, it's given us room to grow. What do we need to learn? What did we learn from this? How do we prevent it from happening again? Well, it's a virus. It's going to happen again sometime in some century. But at the same time, it won't be as bad as this time.
Now, I mean, I've heard that some of the research into vaccines and stuff, and I don't want to get into the vaccine argument because I know a few people who have got lots of strong opinions and reasons for and against them. So I don't want to go there. But what I have heard is that it's quite possible that more treatments for things like cancer will come as a result of a lot of the research that was done. And it's incidental things that are driven by other things. Like obviously there was a problem with COVID. They had to try and face it. And they've learned some stuff along the way. And those things will get repurposed for things that will help humanity in other ways.
Exactly.
It's like the moonshot. They spent 10 years doing what it took to get to the moon, and they learned a lot of things. And a lot of stuff we have now, like funny little things like Velcro, as a result of research done for the moonshot.
And then we have the filters from the Apollo 13. How to make a square peg fit in a round hole.
Yeah.
It's all these little things that we don't think of that change things 20 years from now, 10 years.
Yeah, for sure. So there will be positive knock-ons from what we've been through, our collective trauma of the last, 2.5 years. Again, we're a bit too close to see it now. It's all a bit too raw, but we will see that there'll be benefits.
There will be. But we are almost out of time. So where can our viewers and our listeners find you?
Okay, so I've got a website, www.lightbulbmomentshistory.com. It's got a lot of stuff about the book. It's also got, I'm trying to get some subscribers to my currently non-existent newsletter. You can sign up there for that. There's not enough people at the moment to actually justify a newsletter, but it's getting there. The first 100 people who do sign up, you've got they could win one of 5 free signed copies of the book. That's part of the carrot to get people to sign up. And so there'll be there are 5 copies to be given away. At the moment, the book it's available for pre-order on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. It's not released until February 2023, but it's a pre-order's available now. I am about to make some limited pre-order copies available on my website as for sale, but that's probably okay for people in Australia. Overseas, the postage will probably kill you, so it's probably better to wait for it to be available on Amazon or somewhere.
Yes.
You can also catch me on Twitter at Somewhat History. I've even ventured into the world of TikTok. I'm at Lightbulb Moments History there. I don't do little dances or anything, but I have little sort of funny little videos I put up there just to try and drive things. Yeah, that's where I'm available. Yeah, so I'm hopefully trying to get some vibe happening, because I know what it's like. There's lots of people shouting, about their books, and I'm just one voice in the void. So I'm trying to sort of give myself a bit of a point of difference.
That is the
it's a
goal.
positive vibe.
Yeah, it is.
But yeah, so I want people to feel. One reason I mean, it's history, but the other thing I haven't mentioned is the book is funny. It's not just dry history. It's told, like, if there's a joke to be made, I'll go there. Okay, so it's even though it's history and it's real, and I have a serious thesis in that I think the world is getting better, I also want it to be amusing and entertaining. It's not a dry history tome. It's a bit of fun.
Mm-hmm.
So
well, I can't wait to read it. But thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you for having me.
And for all of our viewers and our listeners, happy reading.